Warning: this podcast discusses addiction, mental health, and other sensitive topics. Please listen with care and take a break if needed. You are not alone, and support is available. Welcome back to Malfunction Junction.
Thank you for joining us.
This is Andrew,
This is Jay.
and welcome back. We are here for episode number 2. And on our first episode, we talked about addiction in general and our own stories with addiction. Today we will be covering early addiction warning signs, as well as how you can tell if your loved one or your own family, something like that, friends, anything like that, are going through it themselves. Or if it's you, it could be you.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll just dive right into it today. And with were you using substances to deal with stress, anxiety, or depression right from the beginning?
All right, let's kick it off. So when it comes to early substance use, I think food would qualify. Definitely from an early age. I struggle with weight constantly. Food was always a coping mechanism. Freaking out. Any party I went to, not fitting in with kids and being like, I'm not getting any conversations off. I'm making my way right over to the snack line. I'm going to munch down for a little while, find a happy spot, and just kind of chow through because I couldn't get in on the social part of the internet activities. So that was definitely, probably the first thing that would be any sort of like a coping mechanism in terms of a physical thing that wasn't just a behavioral. But yeah, what about you?
Well, for me, I think I mentioned it a little bit on the last episode where I started using cannabis because I read read on ESPN.com that I had that it helps with depression, and I remember one of the first times I used it and feeling like, oh my god, I'm not depressed right now, and it was like one of those first it was a feeling like, holy shit, that's all I have to do is smoke this grass and I'm not depressed. And then of course that's like when you, with anything, if you use too much of it, it's not going to be a good thing. And so I just eventually began using it constantly because I was like, I don't want to be depressed, and it just went to just to answer that question blatantly, it just was. Yeah. It was just anxiety and depression. Not so much stress. I've always been fine with dealing with stress, but for the most part, just go work out or something. But
do you think that anxiety and depression for you was at all related to high stress levels growing up? I mean, do you have much internal conflict or external conflict earlier in your life?
Yeah. I had from a very early age, had some pretty stressful shit going on. I was just, authority problems growing up. I always had issues with authority because of just issues that I felt like happened to me rather than were I did to myself. Which is, look, if you have a problem that you did to yourself, it
doesn't have the same.
It doesn't have the same feelings. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have the same. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Inescapability, because it's like when it's someone else, you're just kind of stuck with it, especially early on. And I think I probably had different authority issues, maybe than you did growing up. Mainly just feeling like I could get away with shit. I had pretty loving parents, but a lot of struggle with agreeing to shit that I thought was stupid, and so I had a little bit of manipulative patterns. And I think both of those two things, authority issues and habits early on of manipulation or lying or getting shit out, I think those are probably some of the most consistent warning signs I've seen in people that have addiction issues.
Oh, yeah.
And then those things just ramp up to another level when you meet someone who's in the active stages of addiction.
Yes.
And that's just constant lying, and it's just default, I did it with food, all over the place.
We had, especially to go with that, with authority figures, when it was then put into, my dad was always, and I love my dad. He's great, and we have a great relationship now. But when I was younger and I was going through that, they didn't know what I was going through. Of just as a kid that had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and didn't really know what was going on with that, and having to take these crazy medications, and I at some point, like my dad and I have never been enemies, but at some point it was like he's telling me to do all this shit and I don't think he's right, and so because I was like, there was one day I'll always remember this. My dad, I was like in a good mood because I had just smoked, and I was making breakfast for the family, and I was just like hanging out, and like I was talking to them, and my dad goes, "Why can't you be in a good mood like this all the time?" And I go, "Dad, I'm high as fuck right now." and he was just like, "Oh." And it was like, it was the first time I ever felt like maybe I just got through to him, that like there's something more on this weed stuff. It's not just like, and like drugs in general. And then I think it did get through him for a little bit, and then of course just got off the rails again for me when I started doing just like other stuff and selling weed.
Working down the way.
Then selling weed turns into selling harder stuff, and then it just.
But I think it's really difficult too when they don't understand the internal circumstances. I kind of had similar situations once I got to high school with my mom a few times accusing me of being on drugs. I was like, "Mom, I couldn't be more sober right now. I'm genuinely losing my mind this much," and trying to explain that, some of the patterns or outlets that I used at that time were the only ways I coped. And because my mom saw those as the problem at times rather than a symptom of the issue, it always just ended up that we never found better coping mechanisms. And I think this is one thing that I would advise to people who are watching someone go through this, to parents who see these types of behaviors in their child, is that, when you see these kind of outlash behaviors, these isolation behaviors, any of the warning signs we'll discuss during this episode about addictive tendencies or proclivities towards drug use, is that you shouldn't be attacking that. We saw this with the DARE program, right? This just over attacking of, well, drugs are bad, drugs are bad, drugs are bad. And well, okay, why are all these kids using drugs? We have to find other outlets. And so because I never found outlets that worked for me earlier in life, and I didn't, ever get somebody who truly understood the way my mind worked, drugs were the only thing that made sense. It was the only thing during that point in life where I could find any relief from my problems, because we never worked out another way to do it.
Right, exactly. And when the very first thing you learn is that you can change your consciousness by taking a drug, and it's not not the first thing you learn is I can change my consciousness by taking a few deep breaths.
Right.
Then you're going to go for the drugs, and that's going to be your default mechanism.
Or that slow worsening too. Sorry to cut you off, but to add on to that, like the snowballing effect when you start hitting more mental health issues, stepping into adulthood. I think that you've gotten to a point already where a lot of the other alternative coping mechanisms, they take months, if not years. Anyone who's been to therapy, your therapist will probably tell you first thing, this isn't going to be overnight. It's not an immediate fix. It's going to take years of doing this and working through these things in order to get a successful result. So when you don't start those things until you're 19, 20, 21 years old of working through how to cope, you're already at a point where it feels inescapable, and then drugs seem like the only option, because the only thing that's going to provide that immediate relief you're looking for, at least from my experience, and probably a few of the people that I was going down that same spiral with at the time.
Well, and also, I think that's a lot of the generation of the internet is a lot of things are immediate gratification. A lot of things are they're available right away. Most things. I could get cocaine in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe it would take longer for the guy to drive over here, but I could at least, figure that out pretty quickly. And I don't want to do that. I have no interest in doing that. It's not at this point. Cocaine's not as fun when you don't drink.
It's a balancing. A balancing act.
Yeah.
I see.
But so it I forgot what I was going to say there, but I'll skip on to the next question. Did you notice your mood changing more often or feeling emotionally flat after you started using?
Well,
or drinking or whatever?
I'm going to talk a little bit more about the lead up on this one, I think, because, as we discussed a little bit prior to starting this podcast, for me, a lot of those things didn't change all that much once the drug use started. It maybe worsened a little bit, but it was really what happened leading up to it. When it came to like mood instability, most of that for me started in probably the 2 to 3 years before I began smoking and drinking on a daily basis. That like 16 to 19 age range was when I started to really have these kind of internal outbursts, which is maybe a little bit of a weird way to phrase it, but when you just start losing it in your mind and you're around people and you're like, well, I can't scream at you, but inside I'm losing it right now. And I have to deal with this. And so that shift on the way.
Those usually result in external outbursts
right.
for me.
right. And I think for me, it eventually did. But that mood changing, the emotional flatness, the feeling of numbness, that a lot for, at least in the most extreme circumstances, came immediately prior to me starting heavy substance use. Of course, some of that worsened. It's hard to say when or how much. I think weed kind of gives you the illusion at times of having normal emotions. It did for me. It made me feel like I was enjoyable. And then everyone around me would comment on my personality changes or my lack of enthusiasm or vice versa, being over enthusiastic. Right. And I didn't realize that I was kind of starting to show these signs of manic or overly expressive behavior. And then when I started drinking, it was the opposite. It was like I didn't give a shit at all anymore. And so, more outbursts, louder, more aggressive, and so on. But like I said, that was all, that path was started, in the years leading up to that. And then it just kept tumbling.
Right, yeah. And I remember there were times growing up where, like I had just asked that question, did you notice your mood changing more often or feeling emotionally flat? There were times that I suppose my mood, I'm with the bipolar disorder, that's a mood disorder. It's the mood was changing all the time, regardless of things. But it was one of those things where the reason that I would use, specifically this was just weed at the time, that I was using this as like a medicine. And that's why it is a little bit troublesome, because with weed, because it can be used as a medicine, but it can also be used as a drug, and a detrimental drug to one's, I don't know about, really overall health. It can really affect your overall health by not necessarily like heroin might, but or methamphetamine might.
Right, it's a lot more secondary of stopping, paying attention to the right things, as opposed to it literally directly affecting your heart well-being.
Right, and so with noticing my mood changing more often, the cannabis use was really based on me being able to control and get a desired outcome every single time, or at least most of the time, because if you get high too many times in one day, it stops working the same way.
Right. It was your stabilizer earlier.
It was a very easy way to just jump right into stabilization. I was fine. I could deal with my shit. But if I was off of it, it was like my brain ached. It was like my mind ached. Not even my brain. That's really interesting too, interior mind.
Yeah, and for your experience growing up, the question obviously being about mood changing or flatness. For me, the flatness was the one that was really more of an issue, is that I was going into these deep dissociative states and cutting myself off, and I just felt numb constantly, and it was just this low, aching depression. And I remember trying to explain that to a therapist, that it just feels like my bones hurt, but emotionally. I don't know how to put this into words. I can't. I don't feel super pissed off. I don't feel super sad. It's none of those types of feelings. For me, it's that flatness, where I think for you, it sounds like you were looking more for that the issue for you was more that you were having these extreme mood changes and finding that flat was your balance. Whereas for me, I needed a little bit more, volatility is not the right word, but change or variance in my mood and behavior based on circumstances, rather than just this constant kind of blah feeling towards everything in life.
Well, and one of these questions we're going to get to is something along the lines of what would you tell your younger self?
Right.
But I one of those things that I would tell my younger self, and I wish that I had as a younger man, was when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I wish that I had had someone that was telling me that it was a gift, that it was not something that I should be afraid of, and that I'm going to have for the rest of my life, and you're going to suffer forever, and it's just you're always going to need to take these medications. It's like I wish someone would have told me like, no, this is a gift, because it is. It's absolutely a gift. Bipolar disorder is one of the most beautiful things in the world. It may be painful sometimes. It really is. It really is painful sometimes. But also, like, as the bipolar mind is one of the things that has kept me. I don't even know what the word is to use, but it's a powerful thing. It's a genius thing. It's one of those things that I'm not always capable of something that's good, whether that be morality based or whether that be artistically based. I'm not always capable of something that's good, but when I am capable of something that's good, when that bipolar mind does show up, the muse, the genius that is, it shows up, and I feel proud of the work that I'm able to put forward, and that's something that people that who are bipolar should I wish they would recognize in themselves that they have that this bipolar disorder that is called a disorder. It's a genius. It's a gift.
Well, and I think to some extent that this applies to many mental disorders. Is that you have to be very careful about treating it like it's a spark or a flare, just because for some people that ends up to leading them away from treatment methods and whatnot. But all of these things are uniqueness, and everybody has that ability to find something good in whatever uniqueness, nuance, differences in their behavior styles that becomes your advantage if you know how to use it properly.
That's where I was getting at.
Right, and that's why it's so important to have those early coping mechanisms. And if you get diagnosed early on, to be around the right therapist or the right doctors, which is arguably the most difficult part about any mental health treatment. It's not finding treatment, it's finding the right treatment.
It's so hard to find the right treatment.
It's insanely difficult. And so, to people who are struggling with any type of mental, disorders, illnesses, I think getting support from friend groups, you kind of perfectly tied in that question to our next one, which is how did your self-talk start to change? But for the parents of these people, understand that if your child is diagnosed early on with bipolar, ADHD, autism, their proclivities to lead towards drug use are going to be significantly higher than someone who's not.
Yeah, I think
and being aware of that is incredibly important to making sure they don't start that addiction cycle before they start their treatment cycles. Because if that addiction, if drugs come before successful treatment, you're gonna have to run down that road for a long fucking time trying to chase it. So it can be a brutal endeavor.
Right. I think I read that it's with bipolar specifically. I mean, this is just a random stat. I have no idea how true this is, but I read somewhere that it's 50%. 50% of bipolar diagnosed people are addicts of some substance.
Yeah, I can believe it. And so I'm going to look some of this up real quick. Do you want to lead into how did your self-talk start to change? You kind of touched on it a little bit. But as you started moving right before, we'll say on the warning signs and the early addiction, problems of it. But do you believe that early on you started noticing changes in your internal talk prior to drug use? Was there anything that started to justify these more extreme states, or when you were moving on to harder substances, was there a change in the way you viewed yourself that made that an easier jump?
Oh yeah, no, my self-talk really struggled with. I didn't really talk about this on the last episode, but when I was 19, I had a child. I fathered a child with a woman. And we had to give him up for adoption because I had just been diagnosed and I wasn't quite prepared to take care of a kid. I don't know if you ever are, but I was specifically very much not. And my self-talk changed quite a bit to a negative perspective, because it was like, you're a piece of shit, you can't even take care of your own fucking kid, like,
Right.
you know, and like stuff like that. And that made it easier to get all the way down to eventually smoking heroin and, you know, doing crack cocaine and things like that. What eventually led me to that, and was, I mean, led me to that's the wrong word, but what eventually allowed me to allow myself to do that was the fact that I was just, in my mind, a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I just was absolutely, I deserved to use heroin, because it was like, well, I'm kind of a piece of shit. There's a line in a Fiddlar song, which Fiddlar stands for "fuck it, dog, life's a risk." Ain't that the truth? There's a line in a Fiddlar song where it's like, it just says, "All my friends are pieces of shit," and I really resonated with that one line. As stupid as it is, as short and stupid as it is, there's more to it, but it was, "All my friends are pieces of shit." Like, I don't know, I love it. I love it, dude. Fuck it, take it. But yeah, I felt like that. Like, I felt, and like, my friends were
It's
good
that
people.
negative self-justification.
My friends were good people for the most part. I do have some friends that were not. Most of them are not alive anymore. But most of my friends that are still alive are good people, and always have been. And I somehow was just allowing myself to be a piece of shit, even though I really should have just been trying to be improving myself. I just wanted to kill myself. And when you want to kill yourself, you are gonna, if you're not willing to put the gun to your head, then, or do something crazy like that, then you're gonna do it via like slow death.
Well, I think once you've spent a lot of time thinking about putting a gun to your head, putting a needle in your arm isn't so bad.
Exactly.
And I mean,
that's
that
exactly.
was, we talked about this a lot in a prior episode, but I also started to have these suicidal ideations in high school, and so like you said, I mean, stepping into something else when it came to drug use was so incredibly mild to me, because like I didn't hang myself. Like you can't knock me for shit, and it did two things. One is it justified that I had enough self-hatred that it justified me doing things that I knew were inherently detrimental to my life. And number two, it gave me the feeling of go fuck yourself to everyone who tried to correct my behavior, because I was like, I don't even want to be here anyways, and I'm holding on, so you should be grateful that like I haven't. My mom was on my ass about my patterns, and it's like, look, am I fucking dead? No. So just say thank you and let's leave it there. Right. That I kind of had this indignation about whether or not someone could correct my behaviors, because I felt so justified in them in the first place, that this is the best alternative. I'm doing the best thing for me. We shouldn't be having a discussion about whether or not my problem, my behavior is a problem, because it's so much better than the alternative. And that, I think, was arguably the worst part of my addiction cycles, is that I knew I needed help, and I couldn't let myself be helped by anyone. It was like, you don't understand me, you don't know me, and you're not fixing what I really want to fix, so let's forget about the drug use. Like, don't take away my crutches,
Yeah.
It pissed me
For
off.
real, dude, yeah.
You want to go to the next one? Or
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
All right, so cool. So were there moments where you thought this probably isn't normal, but ignored it? I think we're kind of touching on this already now, but what was your experience with that? Before drug use, too.
Before drug use, no. I did not really think this wasn't normal, because I was... I mean...
Pre-diagnosis, did you notice behavior
yeah,
change?
absolutely. I was noticing behavior changes, but the thought wasn't like, this isn't like no one else that I know is experiencing this. It wasn't like that. It was like, man, this sucks. Like, what is going on here? Like, and then, but it wasn't like no one else is experiencing this. And there were definitely other people that were experiencing it, but it's like few and farther in between. Mm-hmm. And then when it got to the drug use, it when it, like, at first it was like, well, my friends are doing it, and but it was like I just changed friends to do that activity, and it was like now I have different friends, but and God love them, but like like the friends that I have that I was doing drugs with in high school, like they're good people, and they're in better places now. But it was a lot like me, where it just like it took them a while. There was a lot of failure to launch for a long time, and hopefully some of them are in better places now. But some of those people are still in rough spots.
Right, absolutely. I think for me, when it comes to this probably isn't normal, that started really early on, but I don't think it was ignoring it as much as it was trying to cover it up, which probably ties back into the earlier stuff I talked about with, lying to cope with behaviors, and then developing these kind of manipulative outlets early on of like, well, I don't want people to know what a fuck up I am, and so I'm going to hide it. I mean, I remember like one of the earliest times I got caught lying about stupid shit was I was freaking out one day, and I went in and I ate like 4 bags of chips, right? My mom said 1 bag of chips per day, right? So I ate 4 bags of chips, and I flushed them down the toilet.
Oh, no.
The toilet clogs.
Oh, no.
So my mom calls my uncle. My uncle comes over, takes the toilet apart. I'm in my bedroom, and I just hear, Jacob! So I run out. What's up? And they go, come in here. And I step around the bathroom, and there my uncle's holding these 3, like, shit-stained bags of, like, Sun Chips. And I started to say something, and my mom said, don't lie. Just don't lie. Please don't ever do this again. And I was like, okay. But, that was the earliest coping mechanism I had, and it was the first thing I tried to hide. Was, the fact that I was digging into shit. I remember she had snow cone syrup. I'd, like, drink the snow cone syrup and then put water in it to top it up. You know what I mean? Like, it was just stupid behaviors. But those patterns lasted through everything. And like I said, it always made more sense in my mind to lie about it. It felt like self-preservation for the right reasons, where I was like, well, I'm clearly a fuck-up. I know I'm a fuck-up. I know I shouldn't be doing it. But that means I have to pretend that I'm not, right? Because if I admit it, then I become that, and I don't want to do that in front of my friends and family. It's easier for me to just pretend I'm a good person because I know that eventually I'll change it. And I could justify that inevitably some positive change would come, and that there would always be a day where I could fix it if I wanted to. And I did that with eating. I did that with eating disorders. I did that with drugs, I've done that with all things, where I'd always convinced myself it was better to not talk about it. And so, like I said, I don't think it was ignoring it, but I think it was trying to get everyone else to, especially when they started noticing those patterns.
Absolutely.
And that is the next question. Were there things you started hiding from others early on?
Yeah, I remember one time, like, literally, I became very secretive, like, right away after I started using even the smallest stuff. Like, even I remember after I used tobacco, like, when I was like 13, I like hid it way more than I needed to. Mm-hmm. And like, it's like, then it's like if your parents go into your room or whatever, you're like, oh shit, I gotta find my fucking whatever.
I got a vape freshman year, and I did the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and it's like, they're most definitely not going to find it unless it's weed and it smells. But like, they're most definitely not going to find a can of dip, just that's lodged in a backpack,
inside of a sock drawer, in a backpack, stuffed on a shelf.
Exactly. They're definitely. I mean, unless you're being sketchy about it, they're definitely not going to find it. So, don't listen to me, kids. I was definitely hiding. Well, so a couple of things happened, and I think this question goes even to a deeper place, is that at first it was hiding my use from my parents and from my family and stuff like that. And then it became, I was hiding my intelligence, my will to do well in life, my will to, actually, like, whatever, anything, my will at
Playing
all
down
to
potential.
live, but playing down potential. Exactly. That's what it turned into. Is that I was hiding my potential from others because I wasn't the best there was. At least I didn't feel that way. I don't think I am, but I definitely wasn't in high school. Definitely wasn't in high school, and it was downplaying my potential, even though I did, but it's like I didn't want to admit that I wasn't, great.
Right, because it
you know.
creates a standard to live up to.
Right, it creates a
I
standard
did the
to
same
live up
thing
to,
early
exactly.
on. I had a conversation with a football coach when I was, oh God, probably 10 years old, 9 years old. And he said, good play. That was a really good play. And I had busted my ass. It was in practice. But I went all out. I was a lineman. I blocked. I ran all the way downfield, picked up another block, and my coach was stoked about it. And I remember being so pissed. And my dad was the assistant coach at the time, and he said, we had a conversation about it. And I said, I hate doing really well because then they're going to expect me to do it again. And it was like, I don't want to have to live up to that. That sucked. That was not fun. The reward wasn't worth it. I'm exhausted. I'm out of breath. I would rather just not do it again.
Right.
And it's another thing I wanted to mention earlier. But for me, and I think you as well, and many, many people I know with substance use disorders, avoidant behaviors are one of the most consistent themes in any regard, whether it's just slight type of behavioral patterns of avoiding talking about it and that kind of denial, which is commonplace in almost every single person with a substance use disorder, or it's truly avoidant behaviors, avoidant from relationships, avoidant from responsibilities, from expectations, from creating standards that, you set and people hold you to. And for me, that came from, as long as I can remember, all the way through life. And I still don't know that I've fully found a way to cope with all of them. I still struggle with that in relationships. But I've been able to get to a point now where I force myself to set a standard early on, and then keeping up with it is second nature.
Sure.
If I do really well at the beginning, I go and I work my ass off. I know I have to maintain that. And so now, rather than hiding it, even though my desire to often is still there, I still want to be avoidant and run from that. I force myself to do things that put that out in the open to keep me from doing it.
Sure. How'd your relationship with time, money, or sleep change? You can answer that question first. You thought on that.
So I think for all three of them, all of them have been issues always.
Okay.
The changing part,
Right.
not so much. This was another one we spoke about a little bit beforehand.
Right.
I've been late to everything in my life always. If I'm 10 minutes late, I'm 20 minutes early. Legitimately, my family gives me a round of applause if I show up to a family event on time. If there's a 3:00 party and I get there at 2:55, my brother will go, "Holy shit! Look who walked in the door!" It's a big, big deal. Same with money. I stopped myself from getting a credit card for years. I finally got a credit card. Max that motherfucker out.
Yeah,
2
of
months.
course.
And sleep, still struggle with that. The thing that's changed for the positive since then is being more aware of it, talking about it more, finding more, points of accountability, so that even though I still have issues with it, it's not limiting me as much in life as it did before. But early on, the warning signs for those behaviors were always extreme impulse spending, always spending out of impulse, never thinking through it twice. My mom had a conversation with me very early on about that. With time, it was the same thing. It was putting everything off, extreme procrastination-based behaviors, and so on. And like I said, this episode being about the early warning signs, these are things that I saw in all of my friends that ended up going down these abuse cycles. And,
Yes.
and I think all of them tie back to whether or not you had the right coping mechanisms and the ability to deal with impulsive behaviors and running from problems. And if you didn't have that, and you did it with time, and you did it with money, and you did it with sleep, you're probably going to do it with weed or alcohol, and you're probably going to do it with something more serious, and the spiral never stops unless you figure out a way to change the initial behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And for myself, I saw my relationship with money change the most out of those three. I saw my relationship with money go essentially to, I can buy a bag of whatever, XYZ, for however much money here, and just get my high, and I'll have X. Basically, I used to start thinking of like, if I had $100, I really had like 60, because I was gonna go buy a 40.
Right. Yeah.
And like,
you get that addiction brain of like, oh, if I
Yeah.
pinch $10 here and okay, well my car needs an oil change, but
but
I
could
get a $120 oil change, or
or I could get
I can
a,
go get a fucking nice little stash.
yeah,
Yeah. Everything becomes trading off for
yeah,
escaping the experience you don't want to deal with.
right, yeah, exactly. When do you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, I'll ask you this one.
Yeah.
When did you first realize something might be wrong with your substance abuse? And what I'm more curious about here is, when do you think that the signs started showing to the people around you?
I would imagine it showed up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I would imagine that there might be something up with the way that Andrew uses drugs versus the way the rest of us use drugs. Because I definitely and I think that may have been majorly apparent when I went to Europe right after high school, and
Sick.
it was very fun. And I think I was kind of outed as a crazy person to quite a bit of my classmates that went on the trip.
Oh, it was a
because
class field trip.
It was it was, yeah, but it was also like not everybody. It was just kids.
Was it through the school and parents?
It was
chaperoned? Okay.
It was chaperoned by teachers and parents, and it was like at the end of graduation. We went, and so we're all
Sounds
we're
like
all,
a horrible idea.
we're all 18.
That's what I'm saying. You can drink legally there, and they
allowed
took a
to
bunch of
drink,
fucking
and
high
it's
school
just
kids. Like this will go really well for a chaperone.
They
trip.
we were graduated high school kids, but we were graduated high school kids, but we were definitely 18 and just dumb 18-year-olds, and I was the dumbest of the 18-year-olds, and so at least on that trip, and I fucking really did some dumb shit, but I never got I didn't die. I probably could have a couple times, but we didn't die. So, but did you die? So no, I didn't.
And you think during that is kind of when people might have started paying attention?
That was
to it?
probably where most people kind of cut their ties with me, because they were like, Andrew's gonna go down a pretty dark path. I can't go with him. Mm-hmm. And that was when I kind of had my. I went into that right after that. It was summer of after high school, so it's just party, and then it's go into college. And at the end of summer, and I just went to the local JC, so it's just
During this time, are you realizing, oh shit, I might be having issues here, and are kind of overlooking it, or do you still think this isn't a problem, I'm just having fun, everybody else is being a tight ass?
I think I was probably being the latter there.
Yeah.
I was just like everyone else being a tight ass. I don't see what's wrong with this. And then got into college and just went off to the races partying and drinking all the time, which is that's no different than there's a lot of college kids that do that. I'm no different than most college kids at that first year where they just drink and party all the time. And I did make a lot of the number one thing you want to avoid in that freshman year of college is making as an 18, 19, and 20-year-old and 21-year-old too, especially. I think it's a different ballgame at 21, but once you're that 18, 19, 20, the number one thing you want to avoid doing is making a lifelong mistake.
Right.
Something that'll affect you for the rest of your life. That'll always be with you no matter what. And I did do that. I did, but I with having a child, it's a lifelong. I wouldn't call it a mistake. It definitely wasn't a mistake. I mean, it was by technical terms of what they call a mistake baby. But,
Right.
but at the same time, it was I love my son, and I don't believe him to be a mistake. But at the same time, it's you can't make those errors when you're 18. And if you do, though, there's just a lot that is going to be with you for the rest of your life. And yeah, I kind of got away from the question there, but
No, you're right. I
I
think
think that was probably it. Yeah.
yeah, and I think what you touched on there is important too. That like we said at the beginning of this, if you don't figure out these healthy mannerisms prior to getting to these points in life where the stakes just get raised to a whole nother level, which really is the end of high school, early college. It's when you start having sex. It's when you start going out on your own. You start probably trying to do a little more dangerous shit. I enjoyed going to pick up drugs in more sketchy areas. I felt cooler. It felt like I was, going to buy like a quarter pound with a bunch of friends felt
Right,
like
that
I
felt
was,
fun.
Fucking Scarface just sitting over a pile of blow. I felt like I was a drug kingpin at that point,
Right,
picking
yeah.
it up.
Bunch of weed.
And so, it got to a point where
It's just like that's
before you're in
fine,
high
dude.
school
It's
and
legal
like
now.
somebody sneaks you a joint, now you're gonna get minor drug possession charge. Maybe it'll be a suspension from school. If it's really bad, you might go to secondary school. It's fixable issues. Then you get a little older, and it's like, all right, now I'm fucking 19, caught with a quarter pound. Okay, 10 years, 15 years.
Right. Yeah.
And these stakes go up to another level. And that's the scariest part of it, addiction, is that it's not a linear rise. It's exponential. And every step you take just
Yes.
gets, the situation gets that much worse. Where maybe the addictive issues is weed, and hey, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, you're probably forgetting about some shit. You're not organized enough. Maybe you're having some mood changes. Not great. Then you go into alcohol. Now you're starting to become a liability to friends and family. Maybe you get, behind the wheel. Now lives are at risk.
yeah.
But then the next step from there and going into harder substances, I mean, the stakes for that are just insane. And it's so quickly. I mean, I know multiple people, I know you do as well, who just went down a little too far, got caught on the wrong substance, ended up with something that was tainted, mixed product, and didn't make it out.
Yep.
And it's like the chances that happens with some of the minor drugs is a little less, and so it's easy to tell yourself, I'm cool here, I feel comfortable, and the next step isn't as daunting because you're already in these phases. And it's why you have to have people around you who are outside of that addiction. You cannot constantly surround yourself with people who are also using, if you want to change. Right, like
Right,
if
if
the
you wanna
intention is to
change.
get better.
If you wanna change, yeah.
You want to be in a balanced social circle, because had I done that more and not avoided everyone who was calling out my behaviors, I probably would have avoided a lot of more negative aspects of my life. Luckily, I had enough of it that they stopped me from getting to a point where it got to an irreversible level, but not everybody does. And that ties into the next one, which is did your social circle change early on in addiction?
Yes, definitely.
Hit it.
I think it went to. It more so didn't change from the perspective of like who was in it because all of them left. It changed because we just added a bunch of people that were like also drug users, and they were just more sketchy people, and they were just like so and like there were definitely some people that were like, yeah, Andrew's going down a bad path, I can't go there too. But then there were some that were like, just like, oh, dude, yeah, let's fucking do XYZ, whatever drug you want to do. Mm-hmm. And like, oh, you got a new drug? I've never tried that.
Those loose
like,
cannon friends?
Yeah, loose cannon friends. That was me. I was the loose cannon. And it was just like, it's just, my social circle certainly like, just added with addiction, with the people that were also willing to do dumb shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Right.
there's always that like mob mentality where I think early on what I saw as kind of dangerous behavior or was scary to me, drinking with a couple friends was daunting. It was a big deal. But then, like you said, you go to college and there's 300 kids that are all shit-faced at this party, and I've got 10 friends that are driving themselves home, and suddenly it's like, what's one more? I'm not.
Right,
You're no
yeah.
longer the odd man out. It doesn't feel like that big of an issue.
Right.
Seeing friends when I was younger who were smoking all the time were like never showing up to things. I was like, oh my God, this dude's got a real problem. And it was an issue. And then I go to college and everybody on my dorm floor were all like forcing each other. We had like a group chat. You got to call sessions. Somebody was the head. And if you didn't make the session, you'd get your shit fucked with, So it was like we'd wait until everybody was in class studying. You'd have like major exams coming up, which mattered to your degree, which if you're doing it for the right reasons, mattered to the rest of your life. At that point, we're like, fuck your exam, dude. I called a session. You gotta smoke right now. And they're like, no, dude, I'm doing finals. Like, I can't leave. And so it was that where everybody was doing it and everybody thought it was kind of funny. And all of a sudden, it's not a problem for me anymore. Where I'm like,
That's so
this
funny.
is good. This is, I don't give a shit that you're studying or, you have a major test coming up.
That's so
Whereas
funny.
before, it would have been a real issue for me. So yeah, it definitely creates that mob mentality. It makes it a lot easier, the road to slip down a little more lubed up,
Oh yeah. Did you find yourself isolating more or hanging out only with people who used?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
That's kind of touched on the last one.
it is inherently what happens, especially the further you go down the addiction. I think that the only exceptions to that are the extremely isolated addicts, which I've known. I've known people who drink and they try and convince everyone they don't have any issues with alcohol, and
used to
that
be
every
that
time
guy.
you see them, they're fucked up.
I used to be that. Especially when I was in rehab, like when I was drinking. There was a certain part of my life where I was in a sober house and I was drinking, and I would go to. I remember I used to go to the darkest bar that I could find because I was like, look, if someone comes in here, and they're like they see me, I may have a plausible deniability.
Right.
Like, that wasn't me. What are you talking about? Dude, I've been in that bar. It's so dark. There's no way you could have seen me. That wasn't me. Anything. Like, I just was like, it was just stupid. Just because it's like, of course they're going to see you, dude.
In my brain, it makes sense.
It makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Of course, I'm wasted, so I can't see anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm literally going, that's not a bad plan. Like,
Yeah.
I can feel my addict brain going, that's a pretty good idea, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
'Cause I didn't have any of those, so I was always scared of going out in public.
Yeah.
But I think that touches back on earlier, too, as well, with the warning signs of, again, you're isolating. If you start seeing that in people you know and care about, and they're starting to pull away, finding more and more ways of slightly covering up behavior. I mean, those can be incredibly dangerous habits. For a long time, it was, to me, the best form of comfort was to not go back home, not let my family see me, no FaceTiming. I'm still bad about that. I didn't want people to see, where I was at in life because I knew it wasn't reflective of where they wanted me to be.
Right,
And so,
absolutely.
Kind of forcing people into the light, as difficult as it can be, is one of the most important things, I think, to getting people to acknowledge those negative cycles,
Well, I think that's why. I mean, look, interventions do not always work.
No, not always.
But the important part of the addiction intervention, I think, is in any sense of the way. It's how is this affecting? Like, if your loved one is dealing with an addiction cycle, how is this affecting you? You have to tell them that, because I think if you are that person that's listening to this and your loved one is dealing with something, they don't realize they're treating you that shitty, and I know they're treating you shitty, and that sucks. But they don't know that. They're a one-track mind right now. That's addict's brain, and once they get out of that cycle, they're gonna realize how much they mistreated you, hopefully. But you have to realize that they're not in their brain. It's its own thing, addict brain, and it's not. And it kind of rolls into this next question here, which is, what role did denial play for you in the early stages?
All of it.
Right.
Denial was the biggest part. Like I said, it was something that stemmed from early childhood, and yeah, I mean, it only worsened. I keep saying that. I feel like I'm touching on this point a lot, but I can't emphasize enough that all of the patterns that I used to cope with the stress, anxiety, depression, etc., from when I was a little kid, were the same things I used when I got older and all of those things worsened. It was playing it off. It was, no, it's not a problem. It was trying to make a joke about it. It was finding ways to make the negative symptoms of it seem palatable to the people I knew who wouldn't like it, or to downplay it. You know, when my mom first started talking to me about, drinking and smoking too much, I just told her, look, everybody's doing it. Look how, and try to intellectualize as much as possible. No, I'm good. I'm not going out every night, and I'm not doing it all the time. And look, I'm still doing my classes. And I'd find ways to make it seem like this is just a very light habit, where I knew that, like, if I woke up and I was sober for more than an hour, I was ready to have a panic attack.
Right.
I was about to fall apart if I couldn't find a way to get high or drunk immediately. Yeah. And I knew that it was that for me. I knew that I couldn't deal with where my life was at. But when I talk to everybody else, I'm like, no, it's not. It's just, we're just having a little fun. This is just, we're being kids, Mom. This isn't me going down a dark road. And then I go back home and then immediately be in that place of like, I gotta get fucked up right now. I've been sober talking about this for way too long.
Discontent. Yeah, and that's you kind of touched on this a little bit there. Were you comparing yourself to others to justify your use?
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know an addict who doesn't, know.
Absolutely.
It's the inherent nature to be like, well, you see me as a problem. That it's also the nature of like all the gaslighting that happens with drug abuse and people who are in that state of, abusing a substance constantly, where you want everybody else to go, I guess you're right. I guess not that big of a deal. And so you'll do whatever it takes to get them to that point of trying to bullshit them, of lying, of convincing them they don't really know you. For me, a lot of it too was, playing off of the whole idea of me not having healthy mechanisms to my mom, of trying to convince her, this is kind of medicinal for me. I'm just having fun. Yeah. This is just an outlet.
I remember that one.
I don't have a good outlet, so this is what's working for me. And using that as justifications, also involved all of the friends and people I had around where I'm like, look at my buddy. Look how fucked up he is. He sucks right now. I wouldn't do that. This is just for me. So,
Even if it wasn't true, sometimes I just use it to lie to my parents because they'd find me doing something I was like not proud of, and I'd be, well, it's not as bad as so and so.
Right, it's just the natural step where you're like, well, how do I get out of this? By making it seem like less of an issue. It's the easiest way to do that, to play off somebody else who's doing worse.
Yeah. On to the last couple questions here. Go ahead.
I want you to take this one out. All right. What are some early signs people might not realize are signs of addiction?
Oh boy. I think we've touched on this a little bit, but not necessarily lying outright, but stretching of the truth. Mm-hmm. Like and omission, lying by omission. Like I think that's an early sign of like this kid that's something that happens like early on in childhood. Mm-hmm. I think that's some of those things that like if you've got a kid that's lying by omission and that may be a sign that they're learning bad ways of patterns of thinking, of just like, well, I can get away with this by doing this, and then it's like, and that's something that they can use later on, and they're gonna. I mean, that might not be a direct path to addiction, but it also.
No, it's a yellow flag.
It's like, a yellow flag.
This is something that could be an indicator of someone who's not coping with things healthily. I think another part of that, which is kind of what you said, but the ways in which people cope. A lot of people I knew who had issues with addiction. And not just addiction. I think more so what I want to talk about is mental health, because I see addiction as a natural symptom of mental health issues. Most people I know that struggle with depression or anxiety are going to look for a way to cope. It's the natural step. You have to. And so early on, the people I know who moved towards that, a lot of my friend group at the time being a little more jockey when I was younger, a lot of it was downplaying shit with humor. I was really bad about that. And so seeing someone who can never take shit in the face of like, hey, this sucks, this is really bad, let's talk about it, and then that constant playing it off. I remember like when my dad died, all my friends tried to talk about it, and I'd find a way to make a joke, even if it was at the expense of my father or how I felt about it.
Yeah,
but it was like,
it's
let me make you
deflection.
laugh, and then I don't have to talk about this anymore.
Right.
Because all of those types of things, whether it's humor, whether it's lying by omission, whether it's just full on avoidance, all of it is deflection. It's finding ways to not have to face it.
Yep.
And that's what drug addiction is. For a lot of people, not for everybody. Sometimes it's just a spiral, but for most people I know, it's just a way to deflect the things they can't face in that moment. It's life is brutal. I don't know how to deal with my problems. I'm constantly overwhelmed, constantly stressed out. This is the only time I feel okay. And that was what, humor did for me. It was like, I can't talk about this right now. The only time I feel okay is if I can just dissociate from it. And you talking to me about it is not allowing me the space to do that.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, I think the early warning signs are often little things with just the way in which people respond to being confronted, the way they respond to trauma, the way they respond to grief. And are they ever sitting down? Are they the first ones to open up? Are they the first ones to start talking or asking for help? Because if not, chances are they're probably someone with a little more avoidant tendencies, which later can develop into these kind of, abuse situations of not wanting to face it and finding an easier route to manage.
Yeah, I think I agree with that entirely. How can friends or loved ones recognize early warning signs in someone they care about?
That shining the light on them,
Yeah.
You can't let them hide in the dark. If you're a parent, especially, or an authority figure in these situations, you have to dig deep when you see these types of behaviors. I think some of the more old school people I grew up around were like this, where like, I'm gonna take the door off your room type.
Oh yeah. God damn.
Which I think it's difficult because some of those people are incredibly overbearing, and it just creates a more avoidant personality.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to find the balance between creating space for someone to cope with shit and also not allowing them to run from it. Giving them examples on how to deal with problems, getting people into therapy earlier in life when you see these behavioral issues. And like we talked about, cannot emphasize it enough, because I think both of us have done this of being in therapy earlier in life. Find the right fucking therapist.
Oh yeah.
Don't
absolutely.
just stick your kid to the guidance counselor and be like, well, he's getting treated. I don't know.
Yeah.
Fucking don't just take him to the first doctor and the doctor says whatever. And you go, all right, cool. If it doesn't fix the behavioral issues, look for someone else. Because had I spent more time with different grief counselors, I think that a lot of the shit that I struggled with when I first started becoming a man and that I would drink about, like, I remember when I got to college and, like, I didn't know how to tie a tie. I couldn't fix my own fucking tires. I couldn't do an oil change. And I would think about, like, damn, I'm not a man. Like, I wish I had a father. And I'd freak out. And I would think about it way too much when I was in that, like, 18 to 20 headspace.
Right.
And if I had dealt with grief counselors that understood me, I think it would be a lot different. But I dealt with people who just kind of ran the checklist. And I was happy to run the checklist with them and just say whatever they needed to hear to get out of it.
Right.
So, yeah, if you start seeing these, the best thing you can do is take action by trying to get them to talk about it, create the social settings they need to open up, even if that allows them to deflect a little bit. Get the information as you can.
And I think that also, if you realize that they are struggling with something and you recognize what that is, I think you should, get someone. If you are not someone that's experienced what they're going through, try to find something or
Yes.
someone that there is, whether it be through the internet or whether it be like as in something like this podcast, or something that's a friend of yours that has been through it, whatever it is. Like you want them to realize that that's just not the way that you deal with things. There's ways that you deal with things, and that's not one of them. You can, but it ends in a very poor place.
Agreed. And
I think that going on to recognizing early signs, I think that it's you have to, like you said something about presenting the space for them to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be, you have to be accepting. They can't think they're going to be punished for just what they're doing to try to cover up their pain.
Right.
They want you. Yeah. You want to make them think. You want to have them be in a place where they can be honest with you. Otherwise, they're not going to be.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to do that at times without, like you said, having a role model or somebody who understands the situation it's the really hard part about noticing these early warning signs, is that for a lot of parents, I think my mom was one of them, never having experienced any real drug problems. I don't think she could see
Right.
it. Her only reference point was looking up online issues with my child, and then she would plug in, I'm having all these emotional swings. It's like, your child may be using drugs, and so my mom would be like, I'm gonna drug test you, and then it's like, well, now I don't want to tell you what I'm going through, because as soon as I
Yep.
do, it's got to be I'm on drugs, or like I would bring up the fact that I was depressed, and then she would throw that back at times and be like, oh, so the kid who's all depressed wants to tell me how to cope with shit now. I'm like, see, I'm not telling you this anymore because
Right,
I don't want
yeah.
that thrown in my face.
Right, yeah.
And so a lot of times that the idea of creating safe space for someone to discuss these things is, like Andrew said, it's finding a way to talk to them where this isn't about punishment. This is, hey, I see the wrong coping mechanisms now. We gotta fix this, or we're never gonna get better. It's only getting worse from here. So how can I get you to talk about this? Tell me what your real issues are, and then whatever you think works, I'll adapt around that. And sometimes, obviously, with kids, they're not gonna have the perfect coping mechanisms. And you may go, yeah, we can't do that. We can't cope by eating ice cream every day. But maybe that becomes part of their routine, is that, all right, once a week I'll take you out for ice cream. Little things, as small as they are, that allow the kid to make them feel like you're working with them and you're actually being a part of their process is likely going to reduce some of those barriers they have in order to discuss it.
Right.
All right, last one. You want to take this one?
Sure. If you could go back and talk to yourself during that time, what would you say?
Oh, you were the one asking. Okay, I got you. So it's difficult. This is the one I have yet to feel like I can answer correctly. Where I stand in life now, I think the one that crushes me to think about is looking my younger self in the eyes and saying, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just saying you're doing enough was something I never felt.
Right.
I didn't feel like I heard enough. It wasn't something that was ever apparent to me. It constantly felt like I was behind. I'd never lost those feelings of inadequacy with all the things I did, because I was constantly late. I was constantly turning in stuff, but behind schedule, and I wasn't taking care of all my responsibilities, and I was forgetting to do chores. I mean, I forgot to bring my fucking backpack to school. So just showing up for myself and going like, dude, you're doing enough. I mean, that thought alone crushes me. Aside from that, I think telling myself it's okay to talk to people, where people don't have to like you all the time,
Oh, yeah.
were the two crucial aspects, because my desire to be accepted and liked by other people was the thing that pushed me to lie about how bad I was doing. So I was scared of people finding out that I was struggling with mental health. I didn't want people to think I was a pussy because I was depressed.
Right.
And so just telling myself, like, yo, dude, it's all right. Like, you can go talk to your coach. He'll be happy to give you that advice. I didn't find out until I was 19 years old. I had a boss, and she said to me one time, she's like, let me come over and do your laundry. I know you're struggling. I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. And she's like, no, it's okay. I'll come do your laundry. And I was like, no, you're not coming to my fucking house. Like, you're my boss. I'm not doing this. And she was like, do you understand? We lived in the same complex. And she was like, do you understand that you allowing me to do something for you makes me feel good too? Like, I get to be the person that helps you. And that's good for me. It's important for me because I struggled. And I want to be that person for someone. So every now and again, let me help out. And she, cooked dinner for me a couple times and would bring me food. I was never able to let her do my laundry. It was a little too much for me. But I started giving things for her to help me with that it truly did benefit me. I needed that at the time. And I could see that it benefited her. And had I known that earlier, that, a lot of times opening up to these people around you gives them something to be, like, proud of themselves for, would make it a lot more fucking easy when I was a kid to talk about it, because I was so scared that they'd be mad I brought it up in the first place. And now I realize that had I done that, they'd probably be very happy that I was comfortable enough to open up with them.
Absolutely.
But I thought, oh, he'll think I'm such a pussy if I talk to him about this. He'll think, I can't handle myself, or I'm not a man yet. And I was terrified of that.
Right.
And now that I'm older, I probably just tell myself, like, it's okay to talk to people, dude. You're all right. You're going to get a proper response from it. It's not going to be everyone hating you,
Right,
But I
yeah.
convinced myself that was the only response at the time. What
Right.
about you, bub?
I think I would tell myself that it's not the end of the world to be wrong. Yeah, because I was
That's
always
good.
that
is good.
It's always like when I was a kid, that was a part of, like I had mentioned earlier in this episode, where hiding from things by hiding myself, putting self-deflecting myself from things. I think that it was part of that was because I had just realized that there were things that I was wrong about, and then I can't really quite pinpoint what that was, but it was like, and that was like, it was sucked for me at the time. Until I realized that you're like devastatingly wrong about a bunch of shit in life, and it may not be like an opinion or something like that, but it's like the way you're living life is just an absolute mess, and like, I think that it's okay. I think maybe instead of it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to be in a learning process. It's okay to be learning all the time, because you should learn for the rest of your life. You should try to learn forever. And
Giving up a little bit of control over
Right.
the outcomes.
yeah, and that's another one I'd say. Give up some control over the outcomes. Give up some control.
Yeah.
You are not in control. You're definitely not in control.
No, and I think those two, that the idea of controlling outcomes and the being avoidant of, responsibility with everyone else, I think it is probably still some of the things that you and I both struggle with, throughout life, where it's that trying to squeeze and white knuckle the way things are going in order to get what you want. Also, rarely leads you to the outcome you want.
Oh,
that was
absolutely.
one thing I don't think I understood early on. I thought the more effort I put into controlling a situation, the more likely I was to get what I wanted out of that situation. And almost always, it's the exact opposite of that. The more you try and force it, and the more expectations you have of it, the more likely you are to feel underaccomplished when you get to that end result. And if I had just learned, a little bit, all right, well, maybe if I just let it happen and I just learn and take the advice of people who've done this 1,000 times, I might actually get a little closer than if I try and do it my own way.
Right, yeah. Well, all right, I think we can just call that
Tie this
episode.
one up,
Tie
yeah.
this one on up. I think to end this, we'll do a little short piece here about our future plans. If you are a listener who would like to have your story told, featured, anything, reach out to us. You can find us on Instagram at Malfunction Junction Podcast. You can also reach out to us on email, malfunctionjunctionpodcast@gmail.com. And please like, follow, subscribe, whatever. Rate us 5 stars on something. All that's good stuff while you're finding our stuff. But we are looking for doctors and therapists to come on, as well as parents of addicts willing to share stories of their families and addicts themselves. We are hoping to have a listener story of the week that we can, at the very least, have someone who has written in on their email, whatever, and we can feature their story, preferably written out in a 5 to 10 minute fashion that we can tell on the podcast. We'll also be going into a monthly research project at some point. We're going to get that going at some point, who knows when, but we're going to get topics like the war on drugs, the different
Use of drugs by veterans.
use of
people
drugs
with
by
PTSD.
veterans, PTSD, stuff like that, ways of treating different things, methadone, ketamine, anything like that. We're going to do some research on it and come back to you once a month with a report on what we have found.
And a little more thorough breakdown of the nuance of these topics. I think one thing too, if you can, just take a minute, send us any questions you have. We'd love to know what you guys think or want to hear talked about more often, questions you may have had, and we'll try and do a little bit of research on that before our next podcast, and then that way we can give you a nice, thorough, and thought-out answer that relies on a little bit more than our personal experience.
Right. and send those questions to malfunctionjunctionpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you very much, everybody.
Have a great day.
Everybody have a good day.